We move to the next and last presentation. Will be live again. Presentation from France, so we really go all through Europe today. It's a presentation about integrating environmental and socio-economic studies, and will be given to us by Claudia Morin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claudia Morin, and I will make you a quick presentation entitled Operational Integration of Biodiversity in Linear Transport Infrastructure Project. I will focus on the situation in France, because I'm working for a French company. So first of all, I will quickly present the company Setec International, for which I'm working. It's a multidisciplinary engineering group that designs and implements complex and innovative, environmentally friendly construction projects all around the world. And working as environmental engineer at Setec International means that we have to apply the environmental regulation and to propose innovative measures to integrate biodiversity in the projects. So first of all, let's have a look at the French regulation for environment, so please don't be afraid. I'm not going to describe everything today, just keep in mind that it's not drastic enough to tackle all the issues relative to biodiversity, and that it's mixing a lot of topics, so not only environmental topics or biodiversity. In this studies, we are mixing a lot of different topics such as tourism and other technical aspects of infrastructures. So it's a mix of a lot of different subjects. As well, all the regulation is not on this slide, because other permits and consents do exist for other topics, for instance, urbanism or archaeology. A lot of stakeholders are involved in this regulation, so they can be either private or public actors, and so they don't have the same goals, as you can imagine, and even the same schedules or budgets. So in all this regulation, biodiversity is included in some of these studies. So the rock star in our work is the impact studies. And the equivalent. Also, biodiversity is included in specific permits for protected species and in Natura 2000 site studies. For sure, biodiversity is included in the avoid, reduce, and offset approach. What you have to keep in mind is that in France, most of the time, habitats is not protected except for a few exceptions, such as national parks or bioreserves. Studies that are protected are included in the studies because we don't have to destroy them, disturb them, or to threaten their habitats, so that the conservation status is not threatened. So as you can imagine, if we only study biodiversity with these two aspects, we are forgetting a lot of other topics such as fragmentation or genetic losses due to the fragmentation of habitats. Biodiversity is studies with issues, impact, and then measure approach, as you can see on the slide. So first we have to define different level of issues depending on the rules that we set up for a project. And then depending on the work and the infrastructure, we define the level of impacts, and if necessary, we propose some measures. Just keep in mind that the level of issues can change from one project to another, depending on the infrastructure, and also the proportionality principle, so depending on how many impacts we think we have because of a project. So that's what we are doing today, but the idea is to do better in the future. And so one of the questions that is raised is how science could help to improve to assess and to integrate biodiversity into infrastructure projects. So the ambitions not only of Setec but of IENE and a lot of other actors is to bridge the gap between the results of research and the studies for infrastructure. For instance, in the company, some tools are developed thanks to internship, the adaptation of state guides, or even with the work of work groups. Also, some partnerships are done with other companies that are able to traduce the results of research in their studies, so we can include them in the overall project. So it can lead to innovative methods to follow up fauna, for instance. Also, the idea is to be part of research programs such as ITECOP, so to improve the integration of biodiversity. And here you have a list of some subjects that are in reflection in Setec, for instance, is first ecosystem services, how could we include them in our studies, also how to use modeling tools to assess biodiversity, how to study fragmentation, and you have other examples on which we are thinking to improve the integration of biodiversity, but I will mainly talk about the one I just cited. So let's talk a bit about ecosystem services. So it's only a way to approach biodiversity. It's not treated fully the subject, but it's a way to approach it. They have been popularized in the early 2000s, as you may already know. And today it's a really criticized notion, and more than 22 years later, we don't know how to include them in our studies. Do we have to monetize them? Do we have other ways to quantify them in the studies? We don't really know how to do it. An idea could be to integrate them in what we called cost-benefit analysis for the project. So the main point is to give a monetary value for different aspects. For instance, the time gained, the life saved, we are able to do that. But for environmental topics, and especially biodiversity, it's a bit complicated because we don't have a legal framework, we don't have the obligation to do it. And today we don't have one fully recognized value for every ecosystem services in every specific case, as you can imagine. So the main question raised is biodiversity fully and fairly treated in comparison to other socio-economic aspects? Another idea was to develop more modeling tools to include biodiversity. So it was already been done a bit with the company Teroico. The goal is to assess the evolution of an infrastructure through time in 3 dimensions and to include really early in the conception biodiversity. For instance, it can be just a tool to visualize where are the impacts. So here you have the example of a bridge. So if you put your bridge a bit more on your right, you see that you will have a lower impact on wetland, and a bit more on the left, you will have a higher impact. It can seem really simple, but it's really interesting to be able to visualize it at the early stages of your project. And also, it could be a tool just to give you an idea on how much you have to compensate depending on how you decide to build your bridge or other infrastructure. And the last subject of regulation was the study of fragmentation, so relative to species movement and ecological corridors. So by using ecological models, the idea is to be able to know the effect of fragmentation, and having this kind of tools can help to choose in a more scientific approach the parcels where we want to offset and to be led by other arguments than just money and time aspects. And it can be very helpful if we want to improve the ecological transparency of the infrastructure. For instance, when we want to build wildlife bridges. And here you have an example. So it's the very case study. So the road was considering as really preventing the species to go through it, and wildlife bridge was built up on a corridor and farmers were asked to put edges so that the corridor is really functional right now. So it was a successful wildlife bridge. And now let's finish just with offset, which is as well a really criticized notion. So I'm sure you already know it. So we have to propose measures when we don't have a zero residual impact. And in France, it has changed in terms of approach. So before 2010, it was more a ratio approach, which means that we just have to multiplicate with a mathematical factor. For instance, the areas that we've destroyed to know how much we have to offset. And today it's more ecological equivalence approach, so which is much more considering the functionality of what we want to do and what we have destroyed because of the project. And the main goal of it is to not to lose biodiversity thanks to these measures. And to conclude, environmental consultants and all other companies, in fact, we need We want to improve the inclusion of biodiversity in our project, and for that we need tools that are developed and enhanced with scientists. Also, the main questions that are still raised in how we could fully and fairly study biodiversity in comparison to other subjects. Is a stronger regulation really the solution to integrate biodiversity in a better way in the studies? And one we might need today is practical and conclusive tools to do it correctly and in a relevant way in the studies and in the project. And as you may imagine, we have some limits to do it that are quite classical. So money issues, a lack of regulation, a lack of feedbacks on the methods that we could use and what we are reading, and also a lack of tools. I thank you for listening.
Well, I have a question for you. What are so you talked about Teroico, so you are making links with other companies in order for Setec to improve, to mainstream biodiversity in project infrastructures. How do you see the future of this mainstreaming of biodiversity into at the very beginning into planning?
My colleague is here as well to answer, so I don't know if she wants to answer.
Can you repeat the future with
yes, because
association and
it's like a processes for you. You have talked about the first collaboration that you are making. What is the percentage now of among all your projects? What is the
we depend on the types of projects, the leader, and all these parameters. So, but each project is different from another. So we try to make associations during the offer and to present it to the leader project. And sometimes it works, sometimes not. But it's a way to improve and to have better response to impact of project.
So from what I understand and what I've heard from the company, you kind of are an intermediate between like engineering solutions and also environmental solutions. And I was wondering if you've already had to to manage relations between ecologists and environmental scientists, and then on the other side, like the engineers and infrastructure companies like we mentioned this morning. And have you had conflicts to manage? And if yes, how have you managed to be the intermediary between these people? I don't know if my question was clear or not.
Yeah. There are not conflicts, but it's a wrong process, a project, and at the beginning we have good motivations, a lot of ideas, and at the end, when we do the roadworks, we have a lot of problems, technical problems, scientists, and so we have to reduce our measures, and it depends on projects. It depends of the motivation, the money, and also what is very important is the after. We make measures on and next to the project, but it's important to let them live the maintenance, the following. It's very important to have feedback and to motivate the other projects to do the same or to do better.